Welcome to the 445th of the COVID calls. This is a daily discussion of the COVID-19 pandemic with a diverse collection of disaster experts. My name is Scott Gabriel Knowles. I'm a historian of disasters at the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. I'm coming to you live from Daejeon, South Korea. Today, I welcome comedian and host of the podcast Bananas, Kurt BRAUNOHLER. Just a reminder, you can hear COVID calls anytime, recorded as podcasts on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean, or anywhere you get podcasts. And you can catch COVID calls live on the COVID Calls YouTube channel and also on Twitter. You can keep up with COVID calls following the Twitter handle at US of Disaster or at COVID calls. Please help spread the word, send suggestions for future guests and future topics, but please don't wait too long. The regularly scheduled COVID calls will conclude on March 16th. I've been reading an obituary or a story of advocacy for those impacted by the pandemic. I'd like to continue that now. The headline is Ricardo Flanagan, a comedian who contracted COVID, dies at 41. This was written by Alyssa Lukpat and appeared in the New York Times October 13th, 2021. Ricardo Flanagan, a comedian, actor, and rapper best known for his appearances on TV's Last Comic Standing and Shameless, died in Los Angeles in October. He was 41. He contracted COVID-19, said his representative Stu Golfman, who could not confirm the disease, was the cause of Mr. Flanagan's death. On October 1st, Mr. Flanagan said on Twitter that this COVID is no joke. I don't wish this on anybody. On Last Comic Standing, Norm Macdonald, a comedian and a judge on the show who died recently, said Mr. Flanagan was his favorite comic in the competition. I was stunned, Mr. Flanagan would later say about the exchange. After his run on Last Comic Standing, he appeared on several TV shows, including Insecure and Shameless, the Showtime series that featured him in a 4-episode arc, according to his IMDb page. He discovered his love of stand-up after he took a comedy class that he saw advertised on a flyer in Ann Arbor, Michigan, according to a statement from his representative. After the first class, he was hooked and never stopped getting on stage. He had moved to Michigan after graduating from college in 2007, but his comedic talents soon brought him to Los Angeles, his representative said. Mr. Flanagan also dabbled in rap, tweeting recently that he had almost finished an album in a song called Revolution that he released last year, 2020. He lamented police brutality and said, "We got to mobilize. I'm tired of seeing my brother on the ground with his face pinned down," he rapped. Ricardo Eric Flanagan was born March 23rd, 1980 in Cleveland. He's survived by his mother, Katrina McLeod, his father, Keith Flanagan, and his grandmother, along with several aunts, uncles, and cousins. Obituary of Ricardo Flanagan, who died in October of 2021. Okay, I'd like to turn to the conversation for today, and I am really thrilled to bring Kurt BRAUNOHLER back to COVID calls. Let me introduce him. My guest, Kurt BRAUNOHLER, once skywrote How Do I Land in the Sky over Los Angeles. He's a comedian, a writer, and an actor, and has appeared in the Oscar-nominated The Big Sick, the Charlize Theron and Seth Rogen rom-com Long Shot, as well as Fox's Bob's Burgers and NBC's The Good Place. His strange news podcast, Bananas, is available wherever you listen to podcasts. Kurt BRAUNOHLER, welcome back to COVID calls.
Hi, Scott. How you doing?
Good. It's good to see you again. And I guess this is what counts for seeing people these days. It's good to see you again.
This is the only way I see people. No, I'm starting to see people again, which is kind of nice. It is. It's very nice. Yeah.
Help me with the protocol, because I haven't. I mean, I see, in South Korea, we have seen people, but I haven't been back to the States since the pandemic was really in a bad place. So I haven't had that. So is there just one question I actually have? Do you work out ahead of time if you hug?
I've been hugging. Yeah. You can tell immediately from someone's vibe whether they're like we're not even going to touch hands. Do you know what I mean?
Like
they'll
wearing a
usually
full
come in
face
and they'll be like,
shield.
hi. And they'll just be kind of pushed away. And the other people, you can just kind of tell. But it is a new, it is a new kind of like physical reading of people's comfortability. And I'm so exhausted by all of it at this point. But it's like, it seems like we're like, yeah. Hopefully, fingers crossed. I don't want to say too much.
Yeah, I've talked to lots of guests in the States in the last few weeks who said some version of what you just said. It's like, it feels like it's maybe, but I don't.
Yeah,
there's this.
I'll
Omicron
wait once
hesitation.
I'll wait once all the masks come off. I'm gonna wait and see if there's a surge before I get excited again. I now know when to get excited. I feel like.
What's it like it may be hard to generalize in LA, but I mean, people generally wearing masks indoors, or no, it's really
100%.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And we just started up. So Hot Tub is my weekly comedy show, and
long running.
Yeah. And so, we started 17 years ago. It's been weekly. It was weekly up until I think March 12th or something like that of 2020.
Yeah.
And then we stopped. We went online for a year. And then when everybody got vaxxed, we're like, all right, we're coming back, baby. And then it was just like surge after surge after surge. And so then finally, we actually had a date to come back in December. And then it was like, guys, we can't because of Omicron. And so we postponed, and we finally had our first show back Monday, February 28th, which is our first show was February 22nd, 17 years ago, because it was my birthday. It was my 29th birthday. And so that's why I remember it always. So we came back 17 years later, and, everyone has to be vaxxed and boosted and wear a high, KN95 inside, and drink, pull it down, drink, pull it back up. That's the rules. And we have all the doors of the bar open too. So there's like a good cross breeze, which means you can watch the show from the alley now, which you could never do before. And so I was inside watching its opening act. There's a musical guest named Tolliver. He's really funny and cool. And Kristen, my co-host, Kristen Shaw, she has been they've just been very, very careful. For 2 years, they have not been inside a public place. They've maybe gone to the grocery store once or twice, but they have not. If they've eaten somewhere, it's been outside. They've never gone inside. So she was outside, and I could see her through the door watching this opening act. And it was like Hot Tub, like this thing that we started 17 years ago. And the opening act ended, and I came outside, and she just started bawl crying. Like, she was just like so overwhelmed that this thing that we had created was like back. And then when we like opened the show, like she started kind of like got choked up as well. And she's not someone who is usually very emotional like that. And so it was like, it really was it was a marker, and it felt like a turning point for us. And it was really special.
Well, I'm glad you're back in person.
Yeah.
And that catharsis sounds really important. I mean, it's maybe something people need that in the different domains of their life. We were just talking about, reconnecting with or seeing somebody. Like, I want every greeting and every time I do something again in person, I want that. Maybe I don't want to bawl every time, maybe. Or maybe I do. I don't know. I mean, I think there's a lot of pent up, like, just need to express the gratitude to be back with people.
100%. And also it gave me a new appreciation for what I do, because just because of the nature of doing stand-up, you just have to do it time in order to be able to do it. It's not something that you can kind of like do here and there. It's something that you have to just do all the time. And so because of that, you're very close to it. And I would always, especially since I started the podcast, people will always say like, like, oh, what you like, thank you so much. They're always like, thank you, you helped me get through this thing or something like that. And I'm always like, yes, of course, you know what I mean? But we're just having fun. It's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. That's how I always felt. And also about the show too. People are always like, thank you for doing the show. And I'm like, yeah, it's okay. It's not a problem. But watching the show for the first time on Monday night, I just realized what a special thing it is to watch people do stand up, because, and I never thought about it this way before, is that you're just excited to see the inside of someone else's brain and like pushed outward. Do you know what I mean? Like for them to present their view of the world to you, just their take or their experience or their feeling about something, like, and they're presenting it, and it's like being given to you. And it does feel very, if it's enlivening and exciting. And yeah, I just got a little emotional,
Yeah, I love the way you talk about it. I mean, I always love watching you perform, but also I love the way you talk about that sort of magic of performing. But I wanted to ask you a little further about that.
Yeah.
But because you do many different kinds of writing, performance, stand up, many different things. But I want to ask you about stand up particularly, because it seems like there's a couple important things happening. One is the material, which has to be worked. Like you have to work it and then go back and modify and change and probably fine tune it to a level that nobody except you understands. Every comedian probably has their dark art.
Oh yeah.
But then there's also maybe the intangibles about reading an audience for timing. And it seems so you can't do either one of those. I mean, they're connected, but slightly different kinds of parts of the work you do. Did you find a way to online?
No.
So
And we did a show. We did a weekly show. We did a weekly online show, and we never found a way to do it. The technology isn't there to be able to hear an audience's laughter, but not be able to hear them too much, because everyone has their own mic. So imagine the issue we kept running into is, imagine if everyone in the audience had their own microphone at a stand-up show and they were laughing directly into their microphone, but they were also coughing and they're also talking and they're also drinking directly into their microphone. Right. So that's essentially the main problem.
It's too much.
Yeah, it's too much. So, and then the latency, there's like an inherent latency in, internet conversations. There is no way currently with the tech that we have to do it. And we tried so many different ways. People thought they figured it out. People would say, if we figured it out, we got this great system. And then you would like get into it and be like, it's the same damn stuff. Like, we were trying to do it because in the beginning of the pandemic, we were trying to do a comedy special for Amazon that Seth Rogen was going to host, and I was going to help produce and do it with him. And we're just trying to figure out how to do it. This was before vaccines or anything like that. And it was insane to like figure out, if everybody has to be like this far apart, how do we make it sound right? Or if we did it virtually, we have like 20 different sound techs who all had like 10 channels of audio, and they would just be riding them constantly. If someone starts talking, bring it down, put people in cars, mic the cars. Maybe we do it that way. Like we just brainstorm like a million different ways to do it. And ultimately there's just no really good way to do it.
I've watched some of these Netflix specials, Dave Chappelle did.
Yeah.
He went outdoors.
Yeah.
Other comedians, but these are comedians. Some of these have like unlimited budgets, right? So they can, I guess they can do, whatever they want. And the vibe was still not. You could tell it was not.
Yeah.
It was just totally different. I mean, it's hard to tell about their timing. I mean, I watch a lot of Maria Bamford.
She's so
great. Her comedy is just like yours. I mean, it's made for these times. I think it's made for the surreal and the absurd.
Yeah.
she's one who seemed like she could pull it off, because what she's doing is a different kind of performance art, and she's feeding off the audience, but it's a different, like, if her timing is designed to be awkward, I think. But she was the one I watched. I'm like, all right, this still works. But most of the other ones, it just seemed like there was that's just a half beat or something was just off.
Yeah.
Somehow.
And also Maria, off the way that she preps her shows is she'll just tweet, "Hey, I want to do my new hour for one person at a coffee shop at 11 a.m. Who's first to respond gets it." And then people will respond, and she'll be like, "All right, meet me at this coffee shop at 11 a.m. and I'll just do my I'll do my hour for you." Do you know what I mean? So it's like it works that way.
Maybe she was the only comedian who anticipated what it would be like to perform in a pandemic.
Yeah. Having severe social anxiety really paid off for her.
Let me remind everybody that you're listening to COVID Calls, and I'm talking to comedian Kurt BRAUNOHLER today, who's also the host of the podcast Bananas. You've been on my mind. Yeah, you're always on my mind, but you're on my mind. I had some guests recently. I thought, I really wish Kurt was sort of here for this. I had a couple of traffic experts in the UAE. These guys are geniuses at understanding traffic patterns of traffic accidents.
Oh, that's awesome.
And they're studying it in the Middle East, but then also they took a global view. And here's kind of what they found. Traffic accidents in most of the world went down during the pandemic. Traffic accidents that happened were more severe because there are fewer people on the road, driving faster. But the outlier, you guessed it, the United States. Traffic accidents across the board. Also, airline violence. Also, just people being uncivil to each other and acting out. And I felt like I need a Kurt BRAUNOHLER cultural translation of this moment to help me understand what the hell's going on. And I know you track like odd behaviors as part of your day job and report on them. So what the hell's wrong with people?
I don't know. I really, truly, I can't. I wish I had a good answer for you. I mean, people are just really drinking a lot more. That could be it. I don't know, but I do with the traffic stuff, which sounds fascinating. They just recently installed I don't know what city it was, but it's in the United States, an AI that controls traffic lights for like an entire strip on a city, and it like works really very well. And that's of course just going to be our future. But anyway, that is neither here nor there. I have no idea why people are such assholes right now, but people are out of control, especially with the airline stuff. The airline stuff's crazy.
They've had to like modify like rules that they thought they didn't, like, let's make sure we have extra duct tape on the flight in case the flight attendants have to tie somebody up. I mean, this kind of stuff. It's like, I don't know. I was wondering, you pay a lot of attention to people in airports too. I mean, you have great bits about airport behavior. I mean, I just didn't think it could get worse. And then somehow this pandemic, I know there's like a lot of people are pro-social too. A lot of people helping each other. Healthcare workers in this time are like laying down their lives for us. But the public in general just seems to have lost their mind. And I talked to the sociologist Ryan Hagen about it, and I asked him what he thought. He said, maybe just people have been away from each other for 2 years, and we have to actually learn how to be around people again.
Oh, I think we have 100% have to learn how to be around people. I see it in small talk now constantly, where it just like everybody used to just be able to keep the ball up. You know what I mean? Just like blah, 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 bullshit, you know, and now the ball will drop, and then everyone just kind of is like, oh yeah, we don't know how to do this anymore. This like meaningless talk. But in a way, it's eliminate like there is a comfort to small talk, and there's a worthlessness to small talk, at the same time. Like it can be very comforting with strangers and stuff like that, or at a party. But don't you get tired of it? Don't you sometimes just want to either not talk or talk about something that you actually care about? And so I wonder I'm sure we'll just go back to just doing small talk, because it's a social cushion that's very comfortable.
I'm from Texas. I never got tired of small talk. I've missed it.
You're very good at it.
I think during the pandemic, I think particularly in the lockdown, I think my kids are like, "Oh shit, Dad's coming! Like, get out of the like, hey, how's the weather?" Like, we're all in the house, It's like, but I really miss it, because I felt like that is also that's sort of the grounds upon which you do. I hadn't really thought about it much until this conversation, but that's the grounds in which you do like. We're not all comedians, but we're all trying to like constantly time our social interactions. They need to be timed right.
Of
And you don't get that just by sitting alone for 20 hours and then answering getting a box from Amazon and coming rushing back inside and
you get rusty. I think you get rusty, and I think in the same way people have become rusty about not having. When you go out into the world, you no longer have the control over your life that you have in your own home. Do you know what I mean? And that's what you're just used to. People are now used to just everything it being in a controlled environment, even to the extent that their worldview is in a controlled environment. It's being controlled by these AIs of Instagram and Twitter, of what we get fed and seen in YouTube. So not only do we have our physical world controlled because we're in our apartment, in our home, locked down, but also our philosophical and emotional worlds are being in a controlled environment. So then all of a sudden we put these people out in the world, and then it's just like, well, things aren't the way I thought they would be. It's just this change in expectation. Right. And that's what I'm always talking to my daughter about. She's only 4. But I mean, like the majority of things that make her mad is that she has an idea about a thing and it's different from the reality. And I'm always trying to figure out what language can I present this concept to a 4-year-old of like, what the thing that is making you upset is that you have an idea about what is to be, what should be, and that's not the reality of the situation. And if you can find out how to release the requirement that reality matches up with your idea, and of course you can hear the language I'm using, that fucking doesn't make any sense to a 4-year-old. You know what I mean? And I'm just trying to figure out how to talk to her about that, because I think it's such a useful tool.
I think what you're trying to do is figure out how to talk to Americans. Right? I mean, I think what you did, that problem of cognitive dissonance is actually, and I don't want to lay it just on social media or that's an easy explanation to say people just narrowcast their whole world, but there is something to that. And I think it happens to, it happens to me. It's like, when I come back to the States, like, am I going to be immediately accosted at the airport? Somebody's going to come up, and try to take my mask off of me and like tell me the election was rigged. Like, every person I'm going to encounter, at Starbucks is going to, start telling me their QAnon fantasy, because when you're plugged into that and when you're watching MSNBC every night,
that's how it feels like it would be, right?
That's how it feels like it would be,
and it's not. The overwhelming majority of people are not going down those roads.
Let me just remind folks that you're listening to COVID Calls, and I'm talking to Kurt BRAUNOHLER today. People are writing in, Colleen Jasowitz enjoying the conversation, and poet Martha Greenwald, with their observation that we've grown used to seeing only the top third of our bodies and seeing other people when we interact. So a lot of body language is just not available. That's another problem, I guess, when we think about doing comedy and performing in this time, is only seeing, if you're doing it online, just seeing people from shoulders up.
Yeah, and people were sitting down. Like I did most of my stand-up sitting down, Ugh. It's just, it doesn't.
You can't walk around it doesn't make sense, right?
Yeah.
And you like to move. I mean, you're a very physical comedian.
Yeah. And I noticed it's so interesting watching, because I shot a comedy special in August, and it was just like we just hit a sweet spot. It was like right before Delta came on hard. And it's so weird now that we think of times in terms of surges.
It's the pre-Delta special.
Yeah, it was the pre-Delta special, because it was like June to August was like a pretty good fun spot. And then it was like, here we go. It's a shit show again. And watching myself, the way I moved, on the special because I have to watch it over and over and over and over again as we edit it. And let's get a different camera angle on this moment, punch in here, let's pull back here, and it's very, it's removing all of the joy out of any idea of it being comedy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And but just watching the way I was moving, I was like, oh, I'm moving slightly weirder than I would normally move because I just had a very short period of time to like get ready and shoot it. So I was like, I think my first show back was in May. And then I had like 4 weekends before shooting it. So it was like May, June, July, and then shot it in August. Did a few shows in LA in August. So I only had, I don't know, if those were all weekends, that's 5 shows a weekend. So I had like 15 shows or something, like get ready and put it down. And I did notice that I was like, my body was just moving in a slightly different way. I kept looking at my feet and then looking up, which, you want to, the eyes are the connection with the audience.
Yeah, right.
Every time you look down, you kind of relieve them. You're like, you're no longer, it's not necessarily connection, but you're relieving them of the feeling that you are leading them somewhere. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand.
You're kind of like taking them. Yeah.
Is that because when you're still sort of mastering the material, your mind needs to be more in the material, and so you're not as able to make it a full, bodily expression of the material? Because when you're really on, the joke is often delivered not even verbally; it's delivered with your body.
I think that it was almost more of a getting used to being in front of an audience again. It was
interesting.
It was a moment for me to recharge. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because when you break it, you can go down and then you're kind of with yourself.
Yeah.
When your eyes are down before you come back up, and now you're there with them.
Yeah. Let me ask you about material for a second. And I guess that I asked you this last time too, but I'm curious if your answer has changed. Just about how to find humor in dark times, and what kind of material you think has been working, or how people, and will be culturally specific too. I have watched, like I said, some comedians who have some COVID material. And then there's that Bo Burnham hour special in which the whole thing is sort of a self-reflection on making art in the middle of a pandemic. And I actually liked that. I didn't think I was going to like it. And then I got really into it.
I liked it too. The one thing I will mention about that, and Bo is a friend, and I think that hour or that hour and a half, I think it could have been 50 minutes. If it was 50 minutes, I think it would have been like the most perfect special ever. Hour and a half is a little too much. I'll tell him that. But what's funny about it too is that like the suggestion of it is that he's like living alone throughout the pandemic. And he wasn't. Like that was just he had a house that he would go to, and his wife was there, his girlfriend. You know? But it's like that artifice, it was required for it to work as an hour. I keep calling it an hour and it's longer, but I thought it was brilliant, and I thought it was edited so well. I thought it was shot so well.
It was convincing.
Yes.
And that was the part I was like, I don't know if this conceit is going to work, that this guy is like being alone with his thoughts and tormenting himself over the absence of an audience, but then tormenting himself over the possibility of an audience. And I was like, I think that might get old. And then I was hooked.
Yeah, I was hooked too.
So it's like one sort of topic, just being alone, which everybody can now relate to. You wouldn't think it would be funny, but there's been, I think, some probably good room for comedy in there. Other like angles on it, or ways you've thought about it, tried to process it through humor?
Starting to watch comedy again, everybody's got like their like little COVID kind of like thing. It's usually up at the top. But I am of the opinion, for me personally, that I like to watch something that takes me out of what this is, and if you're watching something that's recorded and it's all about COVID, ideally in a year and a half or 2 years, it will feel so dated. I mean, it's just going to feel so old because all the information is going to change. And then when COVID 2023 comes out, you know what I mean? It's like, then people are just be like, what is this asshole talking about? So for my special, I just made it evergreen. It was a suggestion by my director, Jonah Ray, who's a very funny comedian himself. And he said, look, the majority of your special is about family, and it's about your mom, and it's about your dad, and it's about your daughter. And you should just remove the COVID material. And I only had really one great COVID joke, but it worked in an idea of just having been inside for so long. Like when you have a kid, you're just inside all of a sudden for like a couple months by yourself, like just, taking care of the child. And so it worked in that context. And I kind of hinted at it. I have a vaccine, an anti-vaxxer joke as well, but it's just 2 jokes in an hour. And both of them don't mention COVID, just because I I do think, and people say this about Bananas, which is my podcast, it's like, we purposefully do not talk about COVID. It is the exact opposite of COVID calls. We do not talk about it. And people have said they just really appreciate it, just because the news is so dark so often, just to have a news show that is, and it's not light. We're not like light, just only happy stuff, but we just don't, we're keeping it to the weird and the beautiful absurdity of the world.
Yeah, I have appreciated that. And I think a lot of people have appreciated that break.
Yeah.
But there's also, this is where historians and comedians are going to have to fight.
Yeah.
Because it's like, I need every comedian to do an hour of COVID material, because we need, in 5-10 years from now, we need to know like how people were processing this anxiety. And comedians are, I mean, in ways that I would have not even expected, comedians right now have become like this spokespeople for our emotions. And even they've become public health. I'm doing air quotes around experts, but I mean, Joe Rogan, Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine.
Yeah.
He was not only a comedian, but I mean, he was a performing comedian. It's like, maybe there's something happening. What's happening, Kurt? Did the guild get together and decide that it's time to, we're not going to do any COVID material because we're all going to be in elected office 3 years from now?
I don't know. I mean, I think all that started with Jon Stewart, really. Once people like actually were getting their news from the Daily Show.
Yeah.
Why doesn't Jon Stewart run for president? Man, he would. I feel like he would win. He's just so good. He's so good.
I think David Letterman would win. I think there are a lot of comedians that probably could win. You're right about Jon Stewart. But he pops up once in a while, actually advocating for 9/11 worker rights. And
I know.
He's
like the Bruce. He's Jersey, baby. He's Jersey. Yeah. You know what I mean? He's like the Bruce Springsteen of comedy.
Yeah.
He'll pop up, make sure everybody's taken care of, then go back to do whatever he was doing.
He goes back to his whatever he does, 1,000-piece puzzles or whatever. Who knows what he does? I have no idea what he does. The opposite of the Daily Show, whatever it was. In a sense, the Daily Show really, and maybe that's part of it, to try to cover the daily news, but then also bring it in from an oblique angle that makes people laugh and then process differently. That's like twice the amount of work of doing journalism.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and also it is exactly, I would also, my opinion on how to handle COVID is not the majority. I am in the minority. I'm in the comedic minority about that. I think if you spoke to many, many, many other comedians, they'd be like, we have a responsibility to take COVID and make it funny, and I just don't. It's not the way I've never kind of done stuff that's going around in the world comedy, and it's just not my brain. But I think a lot of other comedians would think that it's their like responsibility as comedians to talk about it.
I was looking, you were on COVID calls. Let me go back up and see here. You were on in October 6th, 2020.
Wow.
And at that time, there were 210,000 on that day, 210,355 deaths reported from COVID in the US. And here we are in March of 2022. I mean, it does feel COVID does weird things to time.
Mm-hmm.
But, we've talked a lot about your career, and I just wonder, so also, just personally, like, memories of this time in that interval, like, something that really stands out for you that you're like, "Oh, that's what COVID was like."
Wow. I think it's that initial lockdown. I feel like is
Mhm,
the feeling where it was like where people were like wearing their masks to walk their dog by themselves outside, because we just had no idea the uncertainty of that time
mm,
where like, I think my only time outside was to get like strapped up with masks and gloves on and a shield and then go to the grocery store. And that was the only time we go daycare. So it was both kids. And Gus was like 6 months old and he wasn't sleeping through the night. So we weren't sleeping. And then we had to take care of both kids all day long with no income. And then the only chance out of the house was going to that grocery store for a blissful 55 minutes away from the house.
yeah,
And Lauren and I would switch off who would go each week, because it's like a real treat to get to go to the grocery store. Also being a
yeah,
little scared and then
yeah,
coming home and fucking washing down every single piece of grocery item. I think
yeah,
that's going to be the main memory, thinking that like the box of gummy bunnies are going to kill us.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that, and that fear, that visceral fear,
Yeah.
I think it left a pretty deep imprint on people.
Mm-hmm.
And not only the nature of a pandemic and a virus, because it's something you can't see.
Yeah. It's an invisible fear. And the not knowing. Like that when the information wasn't there, that was the scariest part.
Y Your mom was a nurse, right?
Yeah, she was a pediatric nurse for 50 years.
How do you think she would have handled the stress of this time? It's been hell on healthcare workers.
Oh, she would have been out. Maybe she would have gone back. No, she wouldn't have gone back because she would have been, I mean, she would have been 78, 79. So she would have been retired at that time, but she would have, she would have known what to worry about. That's the one thing that I meant. My mom died. We found out that my wife was pregnant the day after my mom's funeral. And so she was a pediatric nurse, and so it's
Yeah.
like, it's always those things that get you the most where it's like, God damn it. Like if I could call my mom about this, she would know
Yeah, right,
what to,
right.
what to do with this kid right now.
Yeah.
And I think about that all the time, but, I don't think yeah, and that's another thing. I feel like we would have been able it would have been such a resource. She would have been like, "This is what you do. Don't worry about this and don't worry about that, but do this." Um, and that's the kind of the thing you're just like, "Oh, well, it would have been nice." But also, I'm kind of happy she didn't have to see this. She got to miss Trump. She got to miss COVID. Uh, so, it was bad.
Yeah.
It was unfortunate when she had to leave, but at least she got out before most of the bad stuff.
Thanks for talking about it, and I that had been on my mind, and I think a lot of people have expressed, and I felt it too, sometimes in irrational ways, concern about people who are actually no longer alive.
Yeah.
Like, maybe that's normal. Maybe it's not just in the pandemic, but there've been flashes of moments with something that happened, like, I'm, like, worried about my grandparents. I'm like, "Oh, they're dead."
Yeah. I know. I mean, imagine that's the thing too. I think I would have been so worried about her during this time, because
Yeah.
she would have been so vulnerable. So yeah, that's a minor relief. Very
Alright,
minor.
let me bring up one more thing before we have just a couple of minutes left in conversation with Kirk
Yeah.
Brownholer today on COVID calls. Jersey.
Hmm.
I always have to get some Jersey time with you because I'm from
Yeah.
Texas originally. I discovered Jersey late in life. I moved to Jersey. I lived there for 7 years, and I loved every minute of it. And you were kind of a Jersey whisperer to me too. Like, I think explain some of your comedy, like, really explains some of the culture. And
Yeah.
you have described yourself as the quintessential product of New Jersey of a particular time and place. I wonder, how has New Jersey handled the pandemic? Is there like a New Jersey brand of dealing with disaster that's different from
I
other
think
places?
in the beginning, I think it was a very interesting because in the beginning they handled it really well.
Yeah.
And their cases were really low, and they still had like bars open and restaurants open when, like California did not and stuff like that. But then I think, it always catches up. But I think they did a really good job with it where they had, I don't know, because I wasn't there. My buddy was there. He was bartending. And so he definitely got COVID because he was bartending there and because it was open. Middletown, look at that, Middletown, New Jersey. So yeah, I do feel like it was, because it's always a mix. Jersey has that like mix between kind of, it's kind of a purple state, but it's a little bit more blue, So I kind of feel like they had like the push against like shutting stuff down, but then when it needed to be shut down, they did shut down.
Yeah. Yeah. The case rates were devastating, and the death rate was so high early that it actually has kept New Jersey among one of the states that's had the highest death rates. But I thought of you. Yeah.
Oh, I had no idea.
And also because it's a wildly diverse state, as you know. I mean,
right, because
really
I'm sure, it's like up north near New York probably was pretty bad right in the beginning.
Yeah.
But down by the shore in the beginning, it was pretty good.
Did you get to surf during this time?
They closed the beaches at some point. In the beginning, they closed the beach. This is the craziest part. I'd started jogging. I had started jogging 6 months before the pandemic started.
Really?
And I liked it. So I started jogging when I was, 43 years old.
You're too tall for jogging.
Yeah, it's true. And also I'm too tall to start jogging when I'm 43 years old. And I really got into it, but I was trail running. And so it was easier on the knees because it was always on dirt. And then they closed all the parks in Los Angeles because they thought that would somehow help by taking people's one ability to exercise away from them,
Yeah.
And I think that was a mistake. So I started running on concrete and then blew out my left knee. And so then had to have knee surgery and then rehabilitation, then started running again and then blew out my right knee and then had to have surgery on my right knee and then rehabilitation. So it was a full year essentially of the pandemic that I was like, had a one or the other knee broken. And so that kept me out of the water a lot, but I did go surfing, but also at a certain point they closed the ocean. Like you weren't allowed to go surf, which is, again, it was the unknowing, which was the most stressful part. You're just like, there's no way on a windy beach
salt
that
water.
people are giving each other a virus in the ocean,
Yeah.
But we just didn't know.
I have to admire you. They took your ocean away. You're like, fine, I'll take the mountain.
Yeah. And then they took my mountain away.
They took your mountain. You're like, all right, I'll take the street.
And then the street was like, nope, we'll take you away.
All right. We just want to remind everybody you've been listening to COVID Calls. And these days you can catch COVID Calls kind of around the clock. We're doing episodes multiple times a day leading up to the 500th episode, March 16th. And you can keep up with the COVID Calls schedule on my Twitter feed at US of Disaster. And it's been great to see Kurt BRAUNOHLER again today and catch up a little bit. And you can catch his podcast Bananas, and you can catch Hot Tub with Kristen Schaal, which is back now on a weekly basis, and then your special coming out. And you are always so incredibly busy and productive, and I love you, and it's great to be with you.
Love you too, buddy. It's good to see you.
Stay healthy, everybody. We'll see you next time on COVID Calls.